Hare Krishna. Today we are going to speak about our beloved Shripad Aindra Prabhu in this holy day of Kartik months in Vrindavan, and I feel very blessed to have such a chance. And thank you so much for this opportunity, Gopal Prabhu, to dive into the sweet memories about Aindra Prabhu.
So, on the 18th, in 2 days, 18th, which is Bahulastami, this book will be released in Krishna Balaram Mandir, Balaram Hall. There will be a function held at 11 a.m. on the 18th to release this new book, which is called Aindra, Kirtan Revolution. This is a first publication of a biography. It is written by Kalachandji Das. He is the brother of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And so this book just recently came out. It's been years in the making, and as you can see, it's very nicely printed. I'll just read from the preface, give you a little introduction to what the book is about. A personality like Aindra Prabhu cannot be described in one book. Meditative and explosive, serious and comic, shy and outrageous, simple and complex, a dedicated and excellent musician, scholar, pujari, kirtan leader, kirtanier, teacher, and disciple. Aindra was a composite of different, diverse, even contradictory qualities and often misunderstood. But he was always intense, and not merely different, but unique, seeming to be not of this world or bound by it. Whatever one's view of Aindra's ideas, his potency cannot be denied. And even today, he remains a leader in the front line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement. His kirtans touching the hearts and transforming lives all around the world, continuing to attract people and support them in their Krishna consciousness. Many contributions helped produce this volume. Akinchana Krishna Das and a team of devotees conducted hundreds of hours of interviews. Rajikishore Das drafted the early version, and Yadavendra Das coordinated the project. Multiple readers offered comments, corrections, and suggestions, or otherwise participated in the years-long efforts. Contained herein are stories told from the range of perspectives by individuals who interacted with Aindra Prabhu at different stages of his life. It is far from exhaustive and makes no claim to be the sole definitive version. There are many, many inspiring and instructive stories about Aindra not included, and readers are encouraged to share their own experiences and views of his life and teachings and influence. Likewise, a great cast of characters played roles in Aindra Prabhu's story. Some may seem more predominant in this book because they are more extensively quoted, but as many as are mentioned in this account, even more are not. And among them, some of Aindra's closest associates. Requests to not be included have been honored. Other omissions are without intention, but none diminish any of the devotees' importance or contributions to Aindra and Srila Prabhupada's mission. After Aindra Prabhu's departure, one senior devotee reflected, in order to understand Aindra Prabhu, first you have to love him. It is my hope that this volume will help readers get to know Aindra as a person and as a devotee and come to love him, and gain a clearer vision of him as an exemplary of dedication to attention, the holy names, in kirtan and japa, maintaining one's spiritual vows, following the instructions, and remaining faithful to the spiritual master, reading books by Srila Prabhupada and the Vaishnava Acharyas, serving Srila Prabhupada's society, and re-establishing the practice of Harinam Sankirtan. In service to and for the pleasure of the Vaishnavas, I beg the readers forgive any errors or offenses and humbly offer this volume at the feet of their lordships, Sri Sri Radha Shyamasundar, who daily cast their magnificent glance and bestow their blessings upon the dedicated participants of Sri Sri Krishna Balaram Mandir's 24-hour Kirtan. Kalachandji Das. So that's the Prabhu who has authored this book. It contains some interviews, as he mentioned, by Kinshana Krishnadas Prabhu. Kinshana Krishnadas Prabhu had actually interviewed Aindra Prabhu in person while he was present, and asked him many, many different questions. And that is used as part of this book. And Kalachandji has also taken other past interviews with many other different devotees and has kind of compiled and written this book. As he mentions, there'll probably be many other books in the future to come. Some of the closest associates of Aindra Prabhu, some of them only shared very little, if not so much information. It's a very close subject to their hearts. So maybe in the future they'll also share their memories in their own books, like Ram Roy Prabhu, who was in New York doing the Yuga Dharma. Ram Roy Prabhu, senior brahmachari, very close associate of Aindra Prabhu. He is currently in New York City. So any devotees, I'm going to take this opportunity, any devotees around the world who want to participate and join in the Yuga Dharma, if you're in America or visiting New York, Brooklyn Temple, he's based out of there. Which is also part of Aindra Prabhu's history discussed in this book.
Right. Could you please share the background history of this book? The
background history of this book. In 2010, Aindra Prabhu left this world, unfortunately, departed to Goloka Dham, and thereafter I was requested by the temple president to manage the department. And somewhere in 2011, I was approached by some devotees who had been in contact with Ram Roy Prabhu in New York, and they had communicated with him, expressing the need to compile a book about Aindra Prabhu. And of course, His Holiness Giriraj Swami has written a book called A Million Moons. And that book also glorifies many senior Prabhupada disciples who have departed this world. And he had mentioned Aindra Prabhu's name in there and had encouraged that hopefully someone will write a book about his memory. So from the time of 2011, there was a discussion group that was created, and with the advice of the group and the committee, we started to collate and bring together all of this information. A draft was compiled by Braji Kishore Das, and then later Kalachandji Prabhu completed the book. We had to do a lot of extensive research to fact check, to make sure things were correct, the timeline and the history was correct. So that's how it kind of came about. There was a need to kind of document the history before it gets forgotten. You know, in Kali Yuga the memory is very short, so we have to write things down.
Right. So it's basically about 24-hour kirtan, right?
And exclusively Aindra Prabhu. Like we see here in the first part, there's part 1, America. So that discusses when Aindra Prabhu was a new bhakta, before he joined, how he got his first literature, how he met the first Harinam Sankirtan parties, how he came to the first temple, Sunday programs, how he first started interacting, how he first chanted his first japa, his first round, and how he had his first spiritual awakening as a non-devotee. So that's part 1, America. And it's broken into like very nice little short chapters. So, you know, you have like a few pages each chapter. It makes it easy reading. And yeah, so that's part 1. Then part 2 is, of course, Vrindavan. So he joins in America, he gets initiated by Srila Prabhupada, and we share his story of America. And then the main section of the book, I would say, which is probably about that much, the majority of the book, is Aindra Prabhu in Vrindavan.
30 years.
24 years he spent in Vrindavan.
Mm-hmm.
Exclusively, mostly, his main service being the 24-hour kirtan departments.
Why 24-hour kirtan is... what is the essence of 24-hour kirtan? And why 24-hour kirtan rather than 12-hour kirtan, let's say?
So Srila Prabhupada had instructed during the time of the installation of Sri Sri Krishna Balaram. At that time, it's there written in one of the Srimad Bhagavatam purports that Srila Prabhupada had said that the real installation of Gaur Nitai, their Lordship Sri Sri Gauranitai, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram, Shri Shri Radha Shyama was the 24-hour kirtan, the chanting of Hare Krishna. So 24-hour kirtan was a directive given by Srila Prabhupada at the installation of Krishna Balaram. So why 24-hour kirtan? Yes, because it's very easily to be understood. It's the Yuga Dharma. And in such a powerful spiritual place as Sri Vrindavan Dham, we want to have the Yuga Dharma going continuously, and Srila Prabhupada saw a need for that to happen. And originally, before computer technology came to Vrindavan, Aindra Prabhu and the team, they were doing 8-hour kirtan, 4 and 4.
So at the
2
beginning?
shifts in the beginning, yes. So actually it was going on in Srila Prabhupada's time, the 24-hour kirtan, under his directive, under his instruction. Yes, in some temples in the West, on Ekadasis or festivals, they will do 12-hour kirtans. And we know our Sikh brothers in Gurudwaras, they do 12-hour kirtans. They have harmoniums and they sing bhajans from morning till evening, 12 hours a day. But when you have 24 hours, the momentum of the kirtan builds. And we call it akandana. The continuous chanting of the holy name goes on. And it creates such a very powerful spiritual atmosphere. And you can say in some respects that the 24-hour kirtan is the heartbeat of Krishna Balaram Mandir. Just like we have our heart pumping blood constantly, whether we perceive it or not, the heart is constantly 24 hours a day functioning. So the 24-hour kirtan, the chanting of the holy name, is continuously going on. Unfortunately, after some time, after Srila Prabhupada was in Samadhi, it stopped. And in 1986, Aindra Prabhu restarted the 24-hour kirtan. And that story is in here. Mm-hmm. How that came about, what inspired that to happen. And he picked up Srila Prabhupada's orders and instructions and executed it. We know Vrindavan is a very difficult place to live sometimes. It's very hot. Sometimes it's very cold. Can be challenging, the weather conditions. And in those days, in the 1980s, it was very austere. There was no electricity. Even if you had a fan, sometimes there was no electricity. Definitely no air conditioning. Sometimes there was no drinking water. I remember joining the ashram, and I asked Aindra Prabhu, where's the drinking water? He says, well, you can take the risk of getting sick. Be careful. And he explained to me all the different kinds of water sources that were available, but it wasn't really categorized as drinking water. Very austere conditions. So Aindra Prabhu and a team of devotees, some of those devotees are here, still in Vrindavan. Nandan Prabhu is one of them. There was a devotee from Bali, Indonesia, Gopinath Prabhu. There was a devotee from Maharashtra, Nitai. There was another devotee from Mayapur, Devaki Nandan. Another devotee from Nepal, I think his name was Ananda Chaitanya, Salendra Krishna. These were the original team members who worked with Aindra Prabhu to re-inaugurate in 1986 the 24-hour kirtan. And so, to conclude, why? Because it's the Yuga Dharma.
Thank you. And what, in your opinion, how Aindra Prabhu encouraged and taught, trained the team members? Could you please share some stories that you know?
So I kind of joined much later. I joined in the 90s, late 90s. From what I remember, his training was... So yes, I mentioned that in the early days they were doing 4 and 4, 8 hours of kirtan. And then later there was a computer that was brought to the VIHE, the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education. And they did some research in the Bhaktivedanta folio. They looked it up on the computer database, all of Srila Prabhupada's quotations. And he very clearly says 6 hours of kirtan, 3 and 3. So the shifts, Aindra Prabhu would train the men how to exclusively, first of all, be on time for their shift, and most of all, to chant purely for the pleasure of Krishna. To chant in such a way that we are pleasing Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that we're pleasing Gauranitai, Srila Prabhupada, the previous acharyas, and Krishna Balaram and Radha Shamasundar. So he was teaching the men that when chanting, to chant in the mood of Trinadapi Sunechena, Torodapi Saheshana, Amanidena Manidena, Kirtaniya Sadahari, to be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, to be devoid of any sense of false prestige. And in that such a way we can chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. So how was he making the 24-hour kirtan men humble?
How?
He would make them wash the bathrooms. He would take them into the bathrooms himself, and he would get them to clean the bathrooms and the toilets.
I've never heard about this. I heard that he did it by himself.
Yes, he was very much a handyman in the ashram, Aindra Prabhu. If things needed to be fixed or repaired in the ashram, he would sometimes do it. Here in India, we call the workman, okay, just now coming. Just now never comes. Okay,
Right.
tomorrow, call coming.
Right.
So he would, instead of wasting time, he would fix the problems himself. And, there's a picture of him here. I'll see if I can find it. He's doing some handiwork himself, Instead of hiring a carpenter, he's getting the job done himself. And in many respects, taking a humble position and doing humble service, like cleaning the bathrooms, that allows one to actually realize that we're fallen conditioned souls in Kali Yuga, and that trying to be in a leadership position, when you lead kirtan, you're taking a leadership position, just like giving a Bhagavatam class, and to be in a humble state of mind. Of course, there were many practical ways that the men could develop. So musically, learning the proper tal on kartals, the proper beats and rhythms, mridanga. It wasn't necessarily that 24-hour kirtan was a training platform for musicians. He invited many devotees to join in the kirtan and participate. But those who lived in the ashram had to have some basic proficiency in kartals and mridanga at least. And later, as explained in the book, somewhere around the mid-90s, the Vrindavan Mellow recordings were released, and many devotees started to join. Also many Russian devotees, Ukrainian devotees, they started to join the ashram, and Aindra Prabhu referred to them as the backbone of the 24-hour kirtan. The backbone, yes. And so his mood was to allow everybody to participate and to join in. But he did not like and he didn't tolerate people being very proud and arrogant and puffed up and, showing off. He didn't like show-offs, leading kirtan in some kind of way that was not pleasing to Krishna. So when we're chanting Hare Krishna in a public platform with a microphone and a big assembly of guests and devotees, if one hasn't got the right mood, one can be trying to show off or make it about themselves instead of the correct understanding, which is to please Lord Krishna.
So what was his reaction to such kind of leading kirtan?
Oh, he would chastise such individuals. He would, in a mood that would be to help them. And they would understand that. He wasn't doing that chastisement out of arrogance or I'm a senior devotee and you have to listen to me. He would try to encourage people to come to the correct path. So the 24-hour kirtan devotees, they would attend Mangalarti, attend the full morning program, chant their 16 rounds, following the four regulated principles. The only exception was devotees who were on the night shift between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. Two men were allowed to not attend Mangalarti because they were up all night chanting. But of course the next shift, 1 a.m. to 10 a.m., that leads into Mangalarti. So he really encouraged that devotees who lead kirtan have a high spiritual integrity within themselves, in their own conduct and practice. And of course, in correcting devotees, sometimes he could be a little fiery, but at the same time, the devotee could also appreciate his soft side and his real intention, which is to help uplift the devotee to the correct standard, the correct understanding.
I know that there are many stories described in this book, but could you please share some of them which you brightly remember about his conduct, how his attitude, this teaching attitude, I don't know, instructive attitude. How was it with the team members?
So of course, Aindra Prabhu set by his own personal example. In Kartik, one of his favorite months, in 1998, Kartik, I remember going up into his room in the Brahmachari ashram, and Ram Roy Prabhu being there present, reading Krishna book, reading Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. And Aindra Prabhu was taking off the offering that he had made to his lordships and distributing it to the devotees. And we were honoring prasadam, and Ram Roy Prabhu was reading, and Aindra Prabhu was putting his deities to rest. And then at the very end, after even Aindra Prabhu honored prasadam, he kind of indicated to Ram Roy Prabhu, who indicated to the rest of us it was time to leave the room. Instead of hanging out and chatting and talking, he was kind of politely indicating for everyone to leave, because he was rising early, 2 a.m., and chanting many rounds before Mangalarti, and of course the japa time after Mangalarti, and throughout the morning hours, also after Bhagavatam class. He was completing 64 rounds daily. So by setting that example, by his own spiritual practice as an individual, coming to the morning program, chanting like that, we understood that, doing kirtan is serious. It's a serious business. Yes, it is very joyfully performed. At the same time, it's done in a mood to please Krishna. And that mood is expressed by not doing the minimum. But going beyond the minimum, going the extra mile. That's the saying they have in the West. Going the extra mile to show Krishna and to show Prabhupada that we are very serious about our service and what we're doing. So that pretty much, I would say, was the way that he was training the devotees in the department, by setting his own personal example. He didn't push devotees to chant 64 rounds. He didn't push everybody, but he was encouraging devotees to always upgrade, to always come up to a higher standard. And that way, by maintaining a higher standard, we don't allow the standard to degrade. Because we're living in the material world, even though we are in Vrindavan Dham. The natural propensity of the world is that everything degrades, everything falls apart. So it's easy to create something, it's even easier to destroy it, but to maintain it, that's the most challenging thing.
Exactly, the mode of goodness, which is not so easy to stay for a long time, right? So this is how he encouraged by his example the team members, kirtan members, and so many people around the world were also encouraged to listen to his kirtans, come to Vrindavan, join for some time, support 24-hour kirtan. What is the secret of Aindra Prabhu?
Aindra Prabhu's secret is that he loved Krishna. He was completely in love with Krishna and a very dedicated disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He lived his entire existence in Vrindavan during his time here, in Krishna Bhava Mandir, in the Brahmachari ashram. And he was a very humble person in many respects. So his secret was, it's an open secret. He performed the Yuga Dharma. He chanted Kirtan, Sankirtan. And if we just do the Yuga Dharma and try to please Lord Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who has appeared in Kali Yuga himself to experience the bhava of Radha, the mood of Radharani's love for Krishna. He wants to experience what the devotees' feelings are towards Krishna. So when we try to please the Yuga Avatar, according to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then that's the success. And that's the open secret. So by doing that Yuga Dharma, and of course he did it in deep humility, with feeling, with love. That love of chanting Krishna's name, touched the hearts of many devotees around the world through his recordings, and even still till today, we can say that. So that was what I would consider his success, is that he really deeply loved Krishna. And you can feel that, you can hear that in his chanting. And definitely devotees around the world were very moved and touched by his kirtans, and definitely his albums that he personally took the time to sound engineer in Vrindavan. He had a little background in training in sound engineering, it's mentioned in this book. So he had some sound equipment that was brought from America, and he would inculcate and incorporate different atmospheric sound vibrations of Vrindavan. Cows,
Right.
peacocks, the ambience of Vrindavan. And he would mix all these different tracks into his kirtans. And so the official albums, that official releases of Aindra Prabhu was Chintamani Nam, Volume 1 and 2.
Mellows?
Then Vrindavan Mellows 1, 2, 3. And then there's a smaller album called Kirtanas Are Bhajan. And then Prayers to the Dust of Braja and Vraja Vilas, Part 1 and 2. Many of those are up on social media platforms you can listen to. Previously, in those days, it was cassettes, and then later CDs. And that really reflects the mood and the atmosphere of Vrindavan, and of course, Aindra Prabhu's heart.
There are so many albums and kirtans. How long did he work on them?
Oh, one album could be 8 months, 6 months to 8 months, sometimes a year. Perfectionist. He really wanted the sound to be his best sound quality as possible, and he really wanted it to be properly expressing the mood of that particular raga, of that particular kirtan style. And of course, sound engineering in India is not always so easy. There's always a lot of background noises in India, cars beeping their horns and traffic sounds, and so he would stay up late at night to do these recordings, and he put hundreds of man hours, hundreds of hours into editing, into correcting. And of course, in those days, in the 80s and 90s, there was no generators. There were no battery backup systems. So sometimes he could be working for hours on an album, and then the power would cut, and it would all be lost.
Oh my God.
And he'd have to start the whole process again when the electricity would come back. And even he would try and time and figure out when the electricity would be most stable, and work on sound engineering in those hours. I think later on, in the like mid to late 90s, one very kind devotee allowed him to use his apartments in the MVT for sound engineering, because they had a generator backup system. But yes, a lot of sacrifice and austerity has gone into producing those recordings. Of course, there are a lot of live recordings that devotees would just put their microphone and record, but Aindra Prabhu particularly liked those albums that he released. He said that was his mood and that was his standard that he was portraying to the devotee community.
So many hours of work on the albums, 64 rounds daily. He basically didn't sleep.
Of course, his deity worship.
Yeah. I would like to talk about it later, yeah, but so he maybe slept a few hours a day?
Yeah, you could say on a good day, 4 to 5 hours at the most. But he was fully absorbed. And that's what life in Vrindavan means, to be fully absorbed. One can live on the surface of the Dham, but to really go in deep and to really appreciate the mercy of what Vrindavan has to offer, one must be fully absorbed as much as possible in the process of devotional service, the 9 limbs, Nava Anga Bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Arshanam, Dasyam, Sankyam, Atma Nivedanam, Pancha Anga Bhakti, associating with the devotees, worshipping the deities, the lordships, Srimurti Seva, Bhagavat Shravan, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam class, Dham living in the holy place of pilgrimage, pastime place of the Lord, and chanting Hare Krishna. These are the 5 most potent of the 9 limbs of bhakti. So even if Aindra Prabhu was doing the projects of 24-hour kirtan, managing the ashram, taking care of devotees, training them, chanting his japa, worshipping his deities, sound engineering, every weekend he would go on the altar and do Srimurti Sevaya. He would dress their lordships.
Every weekend?
Every weekend. He was invited by Mukunda Dada Prabhu, and especially Saturdays and Sundays, sometimes Janmastamis, Radhastamis, festival days. You know, he was a trained pujari. When he was in New York, that's also explained in the book. Later, he joined in Washington, D.C., and then he was a pujari there. He was trained in Washington, D.C., and then later he was in New York, Temple, Brooklyn. And he also learned how to dress Radha Govinda, their lordships there. And so, back in those days, there was always a need for pujaris. And his name was put on a list, and it remained on that list. You know, even a year after he left his body, I was in the pujari department, and I saw the list. His name was still printed out on the list as one of the pujaris. So in addition to being a kirtaniya, he was also a pujari. He regularly did Srimurti Sevaya on the weekends and festival days. So that's what it means to be in Vrindavan, to be fully absorbed. It's not always easy now. We have these little phone devices with social media that distracts. But in those days, in the 80s and the 90s, there was no internet. You'd be lucky if a telephone worked or a fax machine, you know. So it's a little bit more challenging now with modern technology distracting us. So really to be in Vrindavan means to fully absorb in these 9 practices of bhakti. And that's what I can honestly say is Aindra Prabhu, his life.
Yeah, I heard about his dedication and attachment to the deities, to service to his own Thakurji and so many Shalagram Shilas, and also attraction to Radha Shima Sundar, love to them. Could you please share something about this love and attachment that you got in touch much more closer than so many of us?
Aindra Prabhu's Shalagram worship wasn't as big as it became. In the earlier days, he only had 2 or 3 round plates of Shalagram Shilas, which he had personally acquired when he went to Nepal for getting his visa renewal. He'd never wanted to leave Bharatvarsha. So we also consider Nepal as part of Bharatvarsha, the Vedic community. And he would return with these shalagrams. Later on, many other devotees would gift him shalagram shilas. Many senior godbrothers and sannyasis would give him hundreds. In one case, one sannyasi brought in thousands of shalagrams to worship. And he felt like, oh, Krishna has come to me. I cannot reject or say no. So then he would take it upon himself to worship those thousands of shalagrams. And it could take hours and hours to complete that puja. Of course, that was his own private worship that he did in his room. His original shilas were maybe 300. And as time passed, I think there's now 2,000 plus shalagram shilas. So he was always absorbed. And then, of course, his worship of his beloved lordships, Sri Sri Gaur Nitai, Sri Sri Krishna Balaram, Sri Sri Radha Shyamasundar. He even dressed Krishna Balaram at one time. He was Krishna Balaram's pujari, because sometime there were not enough pujaris. And Gopinath Prabhu from Indonesia told me one story that in the days when they were doing 4 and 4 hours of kirtan, an 8-hour shift, sometimes he would finish kirtan and the pujari department would grab him and say, "You have second initiation? Yes, okay, go take shower and do pujari seva." So he'd finish a 4-hour shift, he'd get dressed in puja clothing and go and do cooking for their lordships, make the offering, do the arti, and then do kirtan again for 4 hours. He said sometimes he didn't have time to eat prasadam. You know, it was full absorption. So in that similar way, Aindra Prabhu when he joined the ISKCON Vrindavan Temple Yatra in the 80s, 1986, he was also incorporated into the Pujari department. And of course, when you worship as a Pujari, the Sevak has a very intimate relationship with their lordships, with the deity, the Murti. And Aindra Prabhu really, really relished and loved worshipping Radha Shyamasundar. And he would engage many other devotees in collecting flowers. On one occasion, I had to return to London in the summer, and I had sent a message via email to somebody to ask Aindra Prabhu what he needed. And he said that he needed jewelry for Radha Shyamasundar. And I very much remember being in a very Krishna conscious mindset, purchasing necklaces and bracelets and ornaments, beautiful jewelry for their lordships, and then bringing them to Aindra Prabhu on Janmashtami and him offering those to Krishna. So a very, very beautiful personal connection to the deities, because Krishna is a person, of course, and Krishna really loves when his devotees worship him with beautiful, nice offerings. And of course, Aindra Prabhu's artistic talent and the way he dressed using balance. If you look at the photographs of when he would dress Radha Shyamasundar, you can see contrast, balance, and complementing. So if on Krishna's turban there would be like a beautiful flower, a gardenia, then he would put on Radharani on the side of her Chandrika. So alternating, matching flowers. He used a lot of artistic sense, flow, some very basic design principles in the way he would dress the lordships. And of course, it's also on YouTube. It's also mentioned in the book when he comes to Mayapur that he does a deity dressing seminar, how to make turbans and how to dress Krishnas in a very beautiful way. So that is there. It's, I think, an 8-part series, which devotees can check out. You can put it in the description for devotees to look at. Those that are pujaris, they'll find a lot of inspiration. And of course, the most important thing, after Aindra Prabhu would dress Radha Shyamasundar, then we would sit in front of Radha Shyamasundars altar and he would perform kirtan for their lordships. There's actually a picture depicting that one morning. So sometimes he would do that after Bhagavatam class, or sometimes he would do that before Bhagavatam class, depending on his mood. So you can say that the completion of all the Nava Anga Bhakti practices is to actually perform Harinam Sankirtan. So even though one may be doing a particular kind of practice of the Nava Anga Bhaktis, then it's really complete with the performance of Sankirtan. And yeah, here's a picture of Aindra Prabhu leading Kirtan after dressing their lordships in the morning.
Is it written there?
Yeah, they put leading Kirtan before evening Arti, but that's not correct. I know this picture. This is actually in the morning time, after he dressed their lordships. And so, in many respects, the perfection of the practice of Nava Anga Bhakti is that it becomes complete by the Yugadama.
Right. How long did it usually take to dress Radha Shyamasundar for him?
Well, he was on a time constraint. So from the time Mangalarti finishes, then they make some announcements, the doors shut, which is about maybe 5:15, 5:20 a.m. until 7 a.m. So you've got about maybe just under 2 hours. It's quite an involved puja seva. Of course, we're from the Tantrika Vidhi process. There's a lot of rituals that have to be performed. For the smaller deities, there are many people on the altar. There are many pujaris. And Aindra Prabhu was very much a perfectionist. So he would come off the altar and he would come down to the ground level and he would squat and look up to see how it looks from the perspective of devotees taking darshan. And then he'd go back up and adjust things. And then he'd come back down and look again. Because when you're dressing the deities, you're on the altar. You're up close. There's a nice picture of that depicted here of Aindra Prabhu quite close to Radha Shamasundar. It's a black and white picture. You can see there, face to face with Krishna, looking Krishna right in the eye. So when you're that close up, you have to change your perspective. And so he would come down from the altar and he'd go by the doors. Even though the doors were closed, he would come down to the level of where the devotees are taking darshan. So Krishna is pleased when his devotees are pleased. And when the devotees are pleased with Krishna, naturally, there's a reciprocal loving relationship there. So he was very, very much into the detail of the way that their lordships would appear. He was very much, like I said before, a perfectionist. So it could take him quite some time. Depending on his schedule, sometimes he would turn up at 6 a.m. He could even turn up at 6:30 and have it complete very fast, depending upon how his schedule was going the night before. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Love is in the details. I heard the story about how, or I saw the picture, Aindra Prabhu taking a nap, covering himself with some deity's dress or something like that. Is it true? Was it true or not?
I don't know about that, but I know that sometimes some devotees would make flower outfits on the big festival days, or sometimes they would make special kind of dresses for Krishna that were hand stitched with the small jasmine buds, Jewy, or Bela, they call them Bela in Vrindavan. And on one occasion somebody brought them up to him and gave them to him as Mahaprasadam. And it says in Nectar Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that we must wear garlands that have been offered to the Lord. You can also wear cloth and clothing that's been offered to Krishna. It mentions that this is called, it's Mahaprasadam, or the Tadiya of the Lord. And I believe there was one picture where somebody had given him, Radharani's dress or Krishna's chadar, and he put it over his head, or he wore it on his chadar, like on his shoulders, like that. So yes, he had a very intimate connection to his service, a very personal relationship with their lordships. And on many occasions, even if his health wasn't so good, or he was giving other people an opportunity to lead kirtan, then like here in this picture, we see he would just stand on the railing in front of Radha Shamasundar and chant his japa for hours sometimes, just staring at Krishna. I highly encourage everyone to do that. I mean, in the month of Kartik, it's a little busy, you might get pushed, but in the off-peak seasons, it's very wonderful to just stand in front of their lordships, Krishna Balaram, Gaurnitai, Radha Shamasundar, and just chant Hare Krishna, the Mahamantra, looking at their lordships. True. It's a very deep, intimate, personal connection.
Helps to be much more focused, right?
Absolutely. And it's also considered that by chanting in front of the deity, the Murti, you get the full benefit of your chanting.
Makes it more personal.
It's fully reciprocal. Yes.
I wonder, you mentioned when he was sick, how he managed to do his seva and other things, because I heard he got seriously sick sometimes. What happened then?
When he was seriously ill or hospitalized, then of course other devotees were given the opportunity to serve his deities, only those that he trusted, very close associated devotees. Sometimes if it wasn't a major sickness, he would just take some kind of paracetamol or painkillers and do his service and then recover later. I remember one time, as now in Vrindavan Kartik, the season is changing. Autumn is really coming in strong. It's getting cooler and cooler each day. There's some flu viruses going around. I was struggling with my health one time and he just said, Prabhu, take some medication, do your service and rest afterwards. So he never missed the service. I would say out of the 24 years in Vrindavan, 98% of the time he was present in his service. 2% of the time you can say he had some, medical issue with his body, and he was not capable of performing his service. There was one occasion where for about 8 to 9 months, a doctor had advised him to rest his voice, otherwise he would lose his voice completely. So he had another devotee leading and doing kirtan in his time service, and he rested in his room, but he chanted 64 rounds every day. And that was quite essential for the longevity of his service to sing Krishna conscious kirtan. But even his deity worship, he never failed to do that unless he was hospitalized, which was also a very rare occasion. Very determined person, and really, really had a lot of love and feeling for Krishna.
Yeah, that helped him to manage his weakness of the body and...
Well, some of the brahmacharis, we would take care of Aindra Prabhu, especially when he was sick.
What did you do?
I would have to call a taxi and drive him to the hospital and arrange the appointments for the doctors. Sometimes he was very stubborn, he refused to go to hospitals, so we would have to call the doctors to his room. Of course, that was only a few occasions, and those occasions were when he would be doing like 3.5 hours of kirtan. I remember particularly one Radha Ashtami, where he performed 3.5 hours of continuous kirtan without break and without drinking any water, and he extremely dehydrated. And that was quite difficult for his body to manage, and he had some further complications from that dehydration. I tried to get him to go in the car to go to the hospital. He refused, so we had to bring a doctor to his room, and the doctor had to administrate his medicine and give his prescription to him in the room, and then we would have to try and take care of him like that. And it wasn't so often he got sick. He was a very strong body, Aindra Prabhu, very strong frame, quite built. So he didn't really get that sick a lot of the time, as many visiting Western devotees. They get quite sick in Vrindavan. It can be very challenging to the health, but somehow he was very robust, and he could just execute his devotional service without any difficulty.
How do you feel 24-hour kirtan would be now if Aindra Prabhu was physically present?
If Aindra Prabhu was physically present nowadays, I feel the 24-hour kirtan would be a lot more glorious, a lot more powerful. Of course, it would attract a lot more devotees to join the department. His physical presence brought a lot of purity, and of course I also feel that he would be very happy if he was physically present nowadays. I think he'd be very happy to see that it's continued, that it's gone on, especially under the current management of Govinda Prabhu. And I feel he'd be very happy to see that many devotees are performing kirtan and doing their own 24-hour kirtans around the world. It's become quite a normal thing to do when there's a festival or a gathering of devotees. At the same time, I definitely feel he would want to see devotees coming up to a more higher spiritual standard of practice. And I'll just take that point and read something that he's mentioning here as part of an interview. Prabhupada had stated, "But purity is the force. Purity arose from sadhana, and its essence was attentive chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra." Prabhupada's program, especially in the beginning, was based on Nam Sankirtan. Aindra later stated he never advocated that book distribution should be nearly total exclusion of Nam Sankirtan, that one had taken precedence over the other. It is this Sankirtan which is the life and soul of our movement. Srila Prabhupada had written, Shrutadev, Sankirtan and book distribution should go on side by side, in parallel lines. He wrote to Govinda Dasi, and I'm always glad when these activities are increasing, and my pleasure is always increasing. The idea of Brihat Kirtan seems to indicate that book distribution takes precedence over Nam Sankirtan. Aindra continued, but you have to carefully understand the whole meaning. Book distribution and Brihar Kirtan is the sense that the words in the book have greater audibility and that they can reach a larger audience. Nam Japa gives us the power and the purity to be able to propagate Krishna consciousness in a real way. Similarly, Nam Sankirtan may seem to have a more limited range of effect than the distribution of a book, but the truth is that Nam Sankirtan empowers individuals to change the world. It is the Yuga Dharma. So, Yuga Dharma, chanting Hare Krishna, of course the study and distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books and Yuga Dharma go together, side by side. So I feel that if Aindra Prabhu was physically present, he would really encourage our devotees to do that a lot more. Also to read Srila Prabhupada's books. Srila Prabhupada's books are his ecstasies. And Aindra Prabhu spent many, many hours studying Srila Prabhupada's books. He knew Srila Prabhupada's books inside and out.
Till the end.
Yes, he could quote exactly places in Srila Prabhupada's books where he could reference. If somebody had a question, he could reference exactly where it was from memory. Yes, he was also reading and studying other books of the acharyas, of the Goswamis, only in context and relationship to where it's mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Prabhupada. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely feel that if Aindra Prabhu was physically present, he would want to see the devotees reading more of Srila Prabhupada's books, and I can only say that for myself personally. Studying more of Srila Prabhupada's books, getting a deeper sense of what it means to chant Shuddhanam, the pure holy name, which he mentions is by attentive chanting, and becoming, upgrading higher, stricter levels of sadhana. And of course, we have personally had the example that in our Krishna Balaram temple, that as the kirtan becomes more blissful and ecstatic, that in the back of the temple they have a bookshop. The devotees who sell the books, they tell us more people buy the books, the more they're dancing and chanting in ecstasy in our kirtans. So I would definitely say that even though Aindra Prabhu is not physically present with us, his bhava or his mood is very much prevalent within the 24 kirtan departments at the current moment. And we encourage all devotees to come and participate and join in. You don't have to lead the kirtan. There are specified devotees who do that as their service, but one can come and support by chanting along with us and engaging 24 hours a day. Of course, there's some restriction on the night kirtan for security reasons, but during the hours from 4 a.m. till about 9 p.m. is open to the public.
Right. I have a few more questions.
Yes.
About if Aindra Prabhu, when Aindra Prabhu was present, were the rules more strict about about everything in kirtan, and now maybe it's less strict, and who control how it's possible to manage it and control?
Well, Aindra Prabhu in the 80s and the 90s, definitely we can say that Vrindavan was a very conservative place, very strict and conservative environment. Over the years and more recently, Vrindavan's become a very popular place. A lot of people have moved here from Delhi and other parts of India and other parts of the world, and there's quite a wide range of different opinions and ideas going on in the temple and around the temple. However, Aindra Prabhu and the department still tries to maintain a level of strictness. Of course, it's very difficult now because so many people are coming, which is also glorious, but it's difficult in the sense that there's not much space to sit. And so sometimes the women the Matajis get a little bit too close to the men and the Prabhus. So in Aindra Prabhu's time, there was definitely more of a clearer understanding that these are brahmacharis, please respect their service and their ashram, and we also respect the Matajis and their ashram. There wasn't so much intermingling. I've noticed that nowadays. Of course, you can say that some devotees have developed a little bit of a style of singing too much alaps.
What's that?
Alap is like a kaval style of singing where the mantra can be disconnected if it's done too much. It's a musical expression. Sometimes Aindra Prabhu would do it only for a quarter or at the most half of the Mahamantra and then return back to the main Mahamantra. And when that style of musical expression was being done, we will all be chanting the Mahamantra continuously. However, that's become too much, I would say, nowadays. I believe he would not be happy with that. He definitely was not in favor of that becoming a normalcy. And I would say that in that respect, he would definitely have a few things to say about how some devotees are chanting. And for sure, there's become a little bit of a fashionable kind of show-off style some kirtan leaders are having. I would not say that that's the current circumstance of the ashram residents, but some of the devotees that live outside of the ashram that come to the temple to participate, they're a little bit too much of an artistic show. Kirtan, Sankirtan is a devotional service. It's one of the topmost devotional services. It's not a show. There's plenty of shows and musicians in the world that are way better. And you can pay a ticket to go and see those performances. But when we do our devotional service to Krishna, we don't show off or try to publicize our bhakti. Otherwise, I definitely would say that it's glorious that more and more people are coming for the kirtans, and we know that now Krishna Balaram Mandir has become very popular and famous with the visiting pilgrims from Delhi and other Haryana, other areas of northern India. And they come to Krishna Balaram Mandir because they want to chant and dance. Specifically, they want to dance. I've even had the personal experience of doing kirtan, sitting, playing mridanga, and some members of the public come to us and say, "Fast karo, do fast," because they want to chant and dance. They want to feel the ecstasy of what we're feeling. So that's one of the glories. And of course, I've also observed that many groups will come through, especially now in Kartik, there's many yatras, many big groups of pilgrims. They'll just take darshan of the Lordship and immediately turn and be looking at the kirtan and engaging with the kirtan continuously for pretty much the whole time they go through the temple. They just kind of acknowledge Krishna's presence in the deity form, bow their head, offer their garland, and they get straight into the kirtan. And that's very much the glories of Aindra Prabhu and Srila Prabhupada's 24-hour kirtan, that you won't find that in other temples in Vrindavan. That there's life. The kirtan brings life to the temple. It brings vibrance and energy and engagement. The pilgrims, if you go on a pilgrimage, we go on a pilgrimage somewhere, we want to come back with a beautiful memory of some way that we engaged with that holy place. And this is the perfect way for the pilgrims and the guests to engage with a beautiful memory, and that is to perform Sankirtan and chant and dance. And that's one of the glories that I see going on.
Yeah, that's true. The atmosphere there is really ecstatic. What I noticed, still many Indian pilgrims, they don't chant. They just sit, observe, and don't chant, which personally I'm surprised by this reaction. What about in times of Aindra Prabhu? Was it sometimes same, and Aindra Prabhu somehow encouraged people not just to sit still?
Yes, he would always encourage people, and of course we'd turn directly to like you're mentioning, some of the guests from different parts of India that come and they'll just sit and smile, and he would tell them to clap their hands. He'd directly instruct them how to clap their hands on the correct beat, and then say bolo bolo prem si bolo, chant, and get everyone engaging, because Sankirtan it's a group participation. It's not a spectator sport. Right. Aindra Prabhu would say that this is not a spectator sport. And so as we would engage the public, as he would get them more interactive, of course they would naturally feel the ecstasy and eventually chant and dance. That's still going on today. Many of the kirtan men are trained to engage the public in clapping and dancing. especially in the arti times. Akinshana Krishnadas Prabhu, he likes to get everyone to dance, gets the whole temple dancing sometimes. And of course in the other shifts, each shift has its own kind of mood. Morning shifts are more mellow. It kind of picks up at the midday arti, and then again in the afternoon after the 4:30 arti, it picks up again leading up to Sandhya arti, and then the last darshan. And then in the night it kind of mellows out and becomes more quiet, a different mood. So we reflect back to the pilgrims what their mood is. And of course, it's participation. It's not a show. We're not trying to do a musical presentation. You know, there's plenty of that in India, musical presentations that are way more expert than what we're doing. What we're doing is Sankirtan. And so Sankirtan is a group participation, yes. And of course, that standard of engaging with the public, it's definitely there, yes.
Yeah, you mentioned that Aindra Prabhu would not be satisfied with certain things, like mood and some technical things, maybe anything else. Like, I know that Matajis this day, they don't really cover head when they sit around. And before he was really also strict with this point, right?
Yes, definitely. I don't think he'd be too happy about how the mood has slightly changed with the devotees that are coming from around the world. Of course, the residents of Vrindavan, the devotees that live here all year round, that are not just coming at festival times. We have a kirtan party for the Matajis that's organized in Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi. Very wonderful kirtan group there. They have their shifts and their hours that they do as well. It just seems to be that we have to tolerate during the month of Kartik or other festival times of the year around Gaur-Purnima. We have to tolerate some visiting devotees coming from around the world that not necessarily don't know correctly the Indian culture and how to conduct themselves and behave properly. However, you know, we kind of tolerate just for the time being. But during the other times of the year, when it's not so peak and busy festival time, for sure the resident devotees, they kind of know and understand what the culture is and follow the culture. I remember Aindra Prabhu telling me, when in Rome, dress like a Roman. So, you know, when in Vrindavan, dress like a Brijvasi, behave like a Brijvasi, behave like the residents and follow the culture, you know.
As I see this photo, but Aindra Prabhu is covering his eyes on the wedding while doing kirtan, right?
So the story behind this, I don't believe this wedding's actually in Delhi. I believe this wedding's in Vrindavan. So some devotees had invited him to attend, and as a renunciate, as a sadhu, we can see here in this book the progression of him joining ISKCON as a brahmachari, new bhakta, a saffron brahmachari, and then when he comes to Vrindavan, you know, he very much starts to wear the clothing of sadhus or a renunciate, a sannyasi. Here you see he's actually wearing like a sannyasi's upper cloth, and then later he kind of wears the vesh of a sadhu. So as a renunciates don't attend wedding functions, but this particular family, these devotees were quite adamant and they were very persistent that he attends that wedding function. And so he kind of relented and then said, okay, I'll go, but I don't want to see the wedding, I don't want to see any of it. I'll put a blindfold on and lead kirtan and then leave. And so some devotees actually held him like they blindfolded him when he got in, after he got out the car, and then he led the kirtan and then he wore the blindfold until he got back in the car and then took it off after, because it's very strict renunciates, very, very strict brahmacharya practice, was not at all loose in his conduct in dealings with visiting guests, visiting devotees at all on any level. I personally saw that he would never spend much time, and sometimes Matajis would come with some question. He would very quickly answer the question and always have another man present with him and then leave. It was very strict sannyasi kind of practice, I would say. Aindra Prabhu was not like hanging out. And so yeah, that picture is kind of in some ways, interesting that he's blindfolded himself. However, that's out of his strictness as a sadhu. Sadhus have to be strict in their personal and private conduct. And that's another point I'd like to make, that Aindra Prabhu's personal life and his private life and his public life, there was no difference. It's completely clear what you saw. In his private life and in his time in the temple room when he was doing his service, there was no difference. A very open person in that respect.
108% of sincerity.
And dedication and commitment to Srila Prabhupada. And yes, a true example of a modern day sadhu.
Mm-hmm. But it's so amazing, he was so dedicated to Srila Prabhupada, respecting him and following in all respects, right? But even Srila Prabhupada, he used to marry his disciples, even the fallen sannyasis, attending the weddings and doing all these things, because of course there was no one to do it maybe instead of him. And Aindra Prabhu, where he got this strictness, this kind of dedication to follow these rules?
Well, historically, Srila Prabhupada in the beginning conducted some of the weddings, and then later he stopped doing that, actually. Mm-hmm. And he had his other disciples doing that. And yes, honesty is the best policy. So, honestly speaking, some people can make it as a sadhu and some can't. And it's better to not be a fake sadhu. But with Aindra Prabhu, he was 100% the real deal. Where did he get the strictness from? I would say his strictness and his love and loyalty to Radha Shyama Sundar. He didn't want anything to come in between his relationship with Guru, Gauranga and Krishna. And therefore he was extremely strict in his conduct. He was extremely strict with himself. He would be very kind and compassionate with others, but he would also expect that level of strictness from the residents of the 24-hour Kirtan ashram. Mm-hmm. Those that were living in the brahmacharya ashram would have to conform to some level of strictness within themselves, for sure. You would expect that. Very much a conservative person in many respects, but also very open and very open to different perspectives and ways of looking at the scriptures. And yes, his brahmacharya practice was very much strict. And that's what's needed. To really live in Vrindavan, one needs to really be a strict sadhu.
Dear Gopal Prabhu, thank you so much for dedicating your time and having desire to share with us all these precious things about Aindra Prabhu and encourage many people to think also more seriously about the goal of life, the way how we can live our life following the example, the true example as Aindra Prabhu was, which encourages me a lot, and it's a great blessing. Thank you.
Well, the greatest blessing Aindra Prabhu brought was the performance of Sankirtan. So everyone just please take as much time and energy as you can to make Krishna a priority in your life by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yugadama Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai.
Jai.